In this video, I'm going to take my learner car out to show you how to judge the sides of your car. One of my earliest memories was actually when I was around about 4 or 5 years old, sitting in the front with a child seat of my dad's Datsun Bluebird estate from 1979, which I actually happen to have a brochure of, this machine here, because I'm a bit of a car nerd. Not exactly the most impressive machine, but as a very young toddler, it was a car with wheels and it moved, so it was wonderful. But the memory wasn't that great, because I remember sitting there thinking, ah, we're going to hit the person, we're going to hit the oncoming car, we're going to have a crash. But of course we didn't. And a lot of the people I teach to drive, and I'm sure a lot of you probably feel the same way sometimes as you're driving down the road and you feel like you're going to hit the oncoming car, which is why driving instructors are permanently trying to stop their pupils from driving into the curb. Most people always want to drive to the left. Rarely do they want to drive to the right. That does happen, but that's normally when they're focusing on the people walking on the pavement rather than the oncoming cars. And herein lies the problem. If you try to judge the sides of your car, which is exactly what those two examples are trying to do, that's what actually causes the problem. So you can't judge the sides of your car. But there is a solution. Firstly, I'll show you why it's hard to judge the sides of your car using this head cam. Now, if you look out the front window, you can see the curb comes all the way over here, somewhere in the front window on the dashboard. Looks like we're on the curb, but I can assure you we're not. We are actually next to the curb, and also the white line on the right looks like it comes through the dash around about here as well. So that lane looks tiny. The window looks huge. The car looks huge. Well, that's the problem. What's the solution? Well, here's the secret. Most experienced drivers don't think about the car when they're driving. They think about themselves. They drive themselves down the road because the car looks so much bigger than it actually is from your perspective. And if you're in a country such as this country where your steering wheel is on the right, you're on the right of the car, you just imagine yourself walking down your lane with your left leg in the middle of your lane. You guide yourself down the road and the car follows. If you're in a country, which 60% of the world are, where the steering wheel is on the other side, you'll use your right leg because your right leg will be the leg nearest the center of your car. But you may be thinking, what about the car? The car's so much bigger than you are. How can you imagine yourself walking down the road? And that's safe because you're tiny compared to the car. This is how you do that. Well, what I do is I use myself to judge where to place the car. I'm not actually using myself to judge how wide the space is. I know this space is wide enough for a car. I can see that blue car would fit in the space, so I know that that space is wide enough. Also, I know the lane on this road is wide enough for a car. So I don't actually worry about the width of the car because I know there's enough space. So when I set off, which I will do now, I'll just make sure it's safe to go, all I'll do is control myself. I'll steer the wheel until I feel like I am standing with my left leg in the middle of my lane, which I am now. Then I know the middle of the car is in the middle of the lane, therefore I should be fine. If you overthink things and start thinking about the side of the car, you'll get into trouble. And it does take confidence to do this. When you're not confident, you will overthink things, but as confidence grows, you'll trust that it works. So can I fit past the black car? Well, yes I can, because I can easily fit the black car in the space. But what about with this red car? Freeze the red car there. Can you fit the black car in that space now? I don't think so. It looks too narrow, so I wouldn't go. But look to the right of the red car. Could the red car move over somewhat to make the gap bigger, to make it easier for you to fit through? If yes is the answer, there's nothing wrong with you encouraging the oncoming car to move over and give you help. To encourage the oncoming car to move over to give you space, you should get a bit closer to that oncoming car. Don't go head on with them. This is not a game of chicken. Just get a little bit closer. If they comply and start to move over, that's great. You're opening up your space. You're making the gap bigger so you can fit. If they don't comply and they stay stubborn where they are, then just wait until they've passed before you go through. Don't be dangerous. And this is because most drivers aren't actually thinking about you. They're most likely in their own world driving down the road. If you get yourself out there a little bit so they notice you, they may think, oh look, someone's trying to fit through here, and then they can help you out. I'm now going to drive down the road with the head cam to show you what it looks like when I go through some narrow gaps. I'm not going to show you the whole clip because that would be boring. I will skip to the important bits. Here goes. So can I fit past this white car? Can I fit the black BMW in the gap? I could. So I would do that very slowly. So I'm not actually going to accelerate here. I'm only doing about 10 miles an hour or so. I can fit next to the blue car that's coming. There's lots of space there. There's lots of space next to that red car. I can fit the red car in the gap. But with the white car, can I fit the red car in the gap? Yes, I can. So I know this car will fit in the gap. You see, I'm not judging the width of my car. I'm not judging the sides of my car. I'm judging the size of the gap, and that's what you've got to try and do. Can I fit in that gap? That's doable. I can fit the car in the gap. I can fit this parked car in the gap, so I could. It was quite small, so I did go slow. I will only go quick if it's a very easy gap. If it's a smaller gap, I will go slowly, and if the gap looks a little bit dodgy, possibly not quite big enough, I won't risk it. I won't go. If you're not sure what I mean by gap, I'm talking about the space you need to drive through between the parked car and the oncoming car. That's the gap you've got to go through, like a gap in the wall, so to speak. I can see that I can fit past the bike because that space is really big, but where there's a van on the right, it gets more narrow. That's quite a narrow gap, so I have slowed down to about 14 miles an hour now. Oh, look what we have. We have a bus. So here I'm actually going to slow down and wait for the bus to come through because that gap doesn't quite look big enough for me. That looks a little bit small. So I'll let them come through first. With the car, I could just about squeeze, but there's no need squeezing when there's only one car. If the cars were continuous, I would squeeze through. And that applies to normal driving. Squeeze through tight gaps when you need to. Don't squeeze through when it's not busy. If there's a need to, yes, try and get the traffic flowing, but if it's not busy, you may as well just wait. This is obviously a very narrow gap. I can just about fit through there. I'm already committed to, there's nowhere for me to wait. Got the white van here coming. I can fit the white van in the space. I can fit the Jaguar coming in the space. So I know there's enough space for me. I'll just position myself in the middle of that space. Ooh, this should be fun. I can fit the light blue car in the gap, and most cars are a similar width. Yes, they vary by, I don't know, 20, 30 centimeters, but you're not going to be judging gaps that accurately anyway. Mince my word there a little bit, accurately. You're going to be judging it a bit more rough. You can easily fit that white car in the space, for example. So any car of any width is going to be able to fit in this space. Fortunately, the oncoming truck has seen me coming. They're waiting to let me finish. That's very good of them. That's what they should do, because there's definitely not enough room for two cars on this bit here. I'll say thank you. And there is a gap big enough next to him. I can fit the white car in the space. I can fit in the space. And obviously I can see this space here is definitely wide enough for one car. So I'll just go down the middle of it. When it is a narrow space, big enough for one car, don't go to the left of it, because you just encourage people to try and squeeze through. That's almost like telling them to come. Get yourself in the middle of that space to tell them, wait for me please, I need to come through. Same here, this is really big enough for just me, no oncoming cars, so I'm not going to be going near the curb like this, encouraging them to come through. That's what learners do. Learners see an oncoming car and they think, oh, let's get out of the way. But sometimes you need to make sure you're bigger and get in the way to get the message across that they need to wait. I can fit next to the black car because I can easily fit the black car in the space, so I'll just go through. I am going to go quite slow here though, because there's a bend and someone could come around that bend quite quickly, and I am on the wrong side of the road. They will need to let me finish. It's not my responsibility now, it's their responsibility to let me finish because I am committed. So now I've shown you how to judge reasonable gaps that are easily big enough for your car. How do you judge the gaps that are really small, where you've got to go through a really tight gap where you're at risk of losing one of your wing mirrors? Well, that is the only time when you're actually going to try and judge the sides of your car. You do it when you're parking, and you do it when you're going through very small gaps. And the only way you can do that safely is to go incredibly slowly. There's two things you can do. One is you can actually look at your wing mirrors when you get close to the object to see if you're going to clear the object or hit the object. If you're really slow, you'll be able to stop before you hit it. And another way is reference markers out the front window. To set a reference marker, firstly you need to carefully park near the curb and then see where the curb touches the bottom of the window. Where the curb touches the bottom of the window is now a reference point, so you know when you're close. When the curb gets that close, you know you're close. Don't let the curb get too close or too much to the right, because obviously you're going to hit it. And you can do that for both sides of the car. So now I've turned the car around and carefully parked close to the curb. You can see I'm relatively close to the curb there, and then I can use the bottom of the window as a reference marker. Remember roughly where that curb is at the bottom of the window, then I know that's where I'm close. Reference markers set. Don't transfer them to other cars because they won't work in other cars. They'll just work in your particular car. It can be useful. I will warn you though, don't use these reference markers when you are going at speed. You need to look up the road when you're driving at speed. Reference markers are only for parking and only for very slow maneuvers or going through very slow gaps, certainly less than 2 or 3 miles an hour. Now I'm going to turn down this road on the left. Look how narrow that looks. I'm certainly going to need both sides of the road to get in there, so I'm going to pause first, get first gear and let anyone out before I go in. Looks like no one's coming out, so let's go through. And this is where it gets quite narrow. This is where the gap gets so narrow you may have to check the sides of your car. I'm okay with this gap with the black and the blue car, but it's where this silver one is after the pigeon that's watching me. That looks a bit more narrow. Through that gap I may actually have to slow down with the clutch down. If you notice, I'm doing very slow speeds, 1 or 2 miles an hour, and I can actually see very clearly there I'm missing the wing mirror on that side, and I can get near this wing mirror on the left and I can see I'm missing it on that side. And I continue to check. I continuously check both sides. Don't just look at one side, because if you become transfixed on one side, you'll probably hit the other side. Now this one's not too hard. Let's try and find one that's a bit harder. Oh, that looks a bit nasty getting in there. Let's try and get in this little gap there. See how that looks. So, okay, just about. I've got my reference marker on the left for the curb. I'm not even doing 1 mile an hour. And I've definitely got space on the right there. The key here is control. If you can control your car really slowly, you can do this. You've got to have good clutch control first before you deal with narrow gaps. I can easily clear that wing mirror there, and my reference marker on the left is fine as well. It's to the left of my marker. Looks a bit wider here. I can probably actually come all the way off the clutch and do more than 4 miles an hour, because I can squeeze through here without having to check the sides. If I have to continuously check the sides like this, it's clutch down job. It's very, very, very slow. You can't have the clutch up because you'll be too fast, and I don't like to take that kind of risk of knocking someone's wing mirror off. Now this looks a bit more narrow here with this Audi, so clutch down again to get a bit slower. I can see my reference markers okay on the left. The right looks good, left looks good, right, yep, definitely good there. Not too hard actually. I've had a lot harder than that. We'll see if we can make it a bit harder. It is getting a bit more narrow down there. It's a bit better here with that Fiat. The Fiesta's got his wheel sticking out, but that looks okay. I can still keep the clutch up there actually. But this black car now, this is the narrow one. That is barely big enough for a car. I mean, you've got quite a handy guide here. You've got that red car in front of us. Is it brown or a red? I don't know, something brown or red. You can barely fit that car in that gap, so no, I can barely fit in that gap. That car's a tiny bit bigger than mine. So if I move forwards now, I can see I'm right on my reference marker. That's like parking distance from the curb. And if you look at my wing mirror, that is really quite close there. And it's actually setting off my reverse sensors saying I'm too close to the objects on the right. So I'll go through here very slowly, 0 miles an hour, just using clutch control, checking both my reference point on the left and the wing mirror on the right. And now I'm clear, and I have a lovely narrow gap. That's my rear reverse sensor going off now, because my reverse sensors actually do the sides as well as the front and back. So as my rear went past a narrow pinch, set the rear side one off as well. And this one looks okay. So we're out of the woods now, job done. So to summarise, use yourself to judge the position of the car. Use the size of the gap and other parked cars up the road to judge the size of the gap. You judge the size of the gap, not the width of your car. If you're in a really, really narrow space, then you can use reference markers, but only use reference markers when you're slow because it takes your eye off the road and you won't be able to stay in a straight line if you start using reference markers at speed. And because when you're using a reference point, you're looking at only one side, you miss the other side. Also, if it is a really narrow gap and there's actually a car there instead of just a curb, you can actually look at the wing mirror on either side regularly to see if you're going to clear the space. But again, you're going to be very slow. You're going to have the clutch down definitely, maybe 1, possibly 2 miles an hour. Or sometimes my speedo registers 0 because I'm not even doing a whole mile an hour as I go through such a gap. Well, I hope this video helps you get through narrow spaces in the road and makes you more confident at judging the width of your car. Not that you're actually judging the width of your car, you're judging the space. If you think it does, please give the video a thumbs up and check out my sponsors in the description, Collingwood and Confused.com. Collingwood are brilliant if you are learning to drive and you want to insure yourself on somebody's car, because you can do that without affecting their policy, taking away some of the stress of learning to drive, because you're not going to affect their no claims bonus if something bad was to happen. If you use the link in the description, you will get a financial benefit and it will support the channel. If you want to insure your own car, check out Confused.com. I time and time again find them to be one of, if not the cheapest comparison website out there, particularly for new and inexperienced drivers, but generally they come out with very good prices for everyone. Again, using the link in the description will support this channel. If you want to get my future videos, please subscribe, and until the next one, cheerio.